Limitless divine beings of love and light, welcome to my channel. My name is Daniel. In today's video, I've got a very exciting topic that I want to share with you guys. One that I've been researching and studying over really for the last decade. I was first introduced to this topic probably about in my early 20s, and I didn't really understand it at the time because my level of consciousness was not high enough to really grasp and understand it. But even just learning about this topic actually opened a door for me to be able to come into a higher state of understanding, and it helped shape the way that I started to look at people and view the world. And so what I want to talk to you about today has tremendous power to be able to bring illumination and insight into the way that you see the world, the way that you see other people, and how it all interacts together. And what I want to talk about is this. It's a model called spiral dynamics, okay? So why is it called spiral dynamics? Because spiral dynamics, it's a model explaining the evolution or the growth of human psyche. And each stage is, you can think of it like a circle, but the next stage that comes out of it is like a spiral going around it, because when you grow to the next stage, it includes everything in the previous stage that you just grew through. Why this model is so great is because, have you ever wondered why, like, you know, some people believe like really like critically or like dogmatically that this is the way and this is the only way, where other people are like really like into like science and they don't believe in faith at all, and how everybody has different views, you know, like why some people are still racist and why some people are so far past racism, you know, why people are self-centered and why some people are so egoic and self-centered and focused on themselves, and they'll seem to do things that will put other people in danger, and why some people are so self-sacrificing and so empathetic and so open to be able to help people and help humanity and just give their life for other people. So this model explains all of that. Now, just a couple things to qualify this model. It is a model, so it does break down. It's a pretty broad stroke in a lot of the ideas that come across, but it is very helpful in being able to help populations and people understand other people. It has actually been implemented in South Africa by psychologists, by governmental leaders during the apartheid and stuff like that. The discrepancies and the troubles that they were having between the black culture and the white culture and the Afrikaans and the different things down there. And so this model was developed by some very smart psychologists. Dr. Claire Graves is one of them, and I'm not sure about the other guy's name right now, but I think it's something McCowan. But anyway, they're very smart psychologists and psychiatrists that came together and they studied populations of university students, and they would give them really big surveys that they would come in about their value systems, about the way that they saw the world, and then they would monitor them as they went through their university degree, and they were shocked to see how different people with maybe some strong values about family, as they went through their values at the end would be valuing like truth or rationalism or something else. And so they developed over years and years and decades of study and research towards this. They developed this model which can explain why people act the way that they do, what they value, and why they value the things that they value. And it's just really awesome, exciting stuff. So let's get into it here. Spiral dynamics has 9 main stages, although that there is a 10th stage emerging. And throughout the stages, there's actually 2 different tiers. So the first tier is made out of 6 stages, and the second tier is the last 3 stages. Now, some important things to remember and consider when learning about spiral dynamics or the evolution of consciousness and these type of things is each stage, as it ascends up, and we grow more advanced or complete, you could say, it's not necessarily that you're better than the stage that you just came out of. You are more evolved, you are more advanced, but it's not to say it's better. So that's why these stages are labeled in colors, not in letters, not in numbers, because the ego likes to grab a hold. Okay, I'm on stage 3 and I just came out of stage 2 and all these stage 2 people are idiots. And so it's actually in colors. And so the colors are beige, purple, red, blue, green, yellow, turquoise, and then coral. Okay? So what happens with this? It's actually 9 stages. Sorry, coral would be the 9th. And we're going to go through, I'm going to just give, these are really, really expanded topics. So I'm just going to briefly go through the stages so that you can have a little guide map to understand why your family acts the way that they do, why different places, why you used to be the way that you were, and where you're at now, and potentially where you're going if you continue growing on this growth process. So another really important thing to know with this is that as we transcend through these stages, so say the first stage from beige to purple, what happens is beige starts off as an individual stage. These stages flip between the individual needs, and then that's the main value and priority. But then when you grow out of that next stage, the pendulum swings to the other side, and you're actually involved. The next stage up values the communal, values the collective needs of the group over the individual. So each stage that we go through, it's going to be a pendulum swinging back and forth, and you'll see that it'll become very clearly the way that this unfolds, the evolution of our consciousness. So it goes from an individual, all about me, to the next stage of communal. Then it'll swing back again to the individual, and so forth, all the way out throughout these stages. Okay, so let's start with beige. Beige is the very instinctive stage. It is like it could be called the survival stage. Okay, and so an example of somebody in beige, there's basically no human beings on the planet anymore that are in beige except for babies. A newborn baby up until like 1.5 years old is going to be in beige. It's going to be focused primarily on its basic needs being met. It really doesn't even know that it's a separate entity yet, that it's a being yet. It's still largely connected in with all that is, with God, with spirit, with source. And so you look into a baby's eyes and it's just glistening with light, and it still feels like that it's one with the parents. And it doesn't know that it's separate. It doesn't know that it's separate from anything else, but it just knows that, it needs to go to the washroom, it needs to eat, it needs to get its need met, it needs to be warm or it'll cry. And so it's all about survival at the very basic level and getting its needs met. An example of this would have been like 100,000 years ago, or however many thousand years ago, if we take a look at like Neanderthal or very primitive caveman. It would have been a fully evolved adult human at that time. We could think of like, batting a woman over the head, pulling her by the hair into the cave and making babies, or killing an animal and roasting it over the fire. Like that is basically it. Not a very advanced level of consciousness. There's really nobody on the planet that's an adult now, except for maybe some very severely disabled people that really, really need help, that have lost control of their mind, or they're just in a really, really like almost vegetable type state. That would be beige. So then moving on to purple, we have the pendulum swing to the other side, where it was very, very much about the individual needs of the person in beige. As the person starts to grow, so as the baby starts to grow, it grows into this state where it starts to realize that its parents are separate from it. But purple stage is the stage of safety or magical thinking. So in this purple stage, it's all about comfort. It's all about feeling safe. It's all about feeling a part of. So, for example, if the caveman back in the day that would be out doing that thing, like surviving on their own, they eventually started to band together in tribes or in groups. And they developed very primitive spiritual senses, and they started to believe like, look at the sun and the moon and they're like, wow, why is this changing? And the sun is like, we need to worship the sun, or we need to worship the moon, or like there's spirits behind every corner, and it becomes a very mystical reality, but not mystical in the transcendent sense of mystical, but very, very primitive mystical. So an example of this might be like a very primitive tribe that hasn't been associated with the modern world at all, in the deep Amazon rainforest that's never seen human contact, that are still believing in like the fairies and different mystical things like that are living together, because when they live together, some person can like tan the hides, some person can kill the food, and it just works to better together, even though they're not super organized about the way that it happens. So they won't consciously be working together as a benefit for the whole, although they'll band together because of their own individual needs of coming out of beige and realizing that those needs get met better with a group of individuals. Okay, so they're very much connected in this purple stage with spirits and different things, and the ancestors and different things, and there's a lot of different like rites of passage or different tribal customs, a very, very primitive tribal culture we could think about as purple. Another example of purple would be like voodoo magic, like, sticking a pin into a doll and being like, that person's going to die. And just having this, but not having any concept or intention behind it, just having that disconnection of I'm going to do this and then it's going to cause this to happen in a magical thinking type way without really understanding consciousness or intention or anything like that behind it. Okay? So as we go through the purple stage, the pendulum swings back to the individual again and it moves into red. So red in an individual setting would take the form of that child growing into like a toddler, like the terrible 2s and 3s. And the stage of the red is the egoic stage. It's the stage of I'm significant. It can also be called the power stage or the force stage, where an individual will do whatever they think is right without consequence to fulfill their desires of their flesh, to fulfill the desires of their pleasure, their significance, and they will go through life stealing, killing, and destroying at the expense of other people because it's helping them feel more powerful, feel better. And so in a purple tribal culture, this is when somebody realizes, I'm stronger than everybody else, I'm killing the most food, I'm going to be the one who is the leader here. And they step up and they become the leader or the king or the elder, and they rule with force. They rule with an iron fist. Okay? In the red stage, the world around you is no longer mystical or magical, but it's threatening. Everything is perceived as a threat. Everything is perceived out of kind of a lens of fear. And so that fear needs to be met with force. That fear needs to be met with anger so that you don't get overtaken by the scary world that's around you. And so it's a reactionary state. And in this state, there's a demand of respect. There's a demand of mine. So like little kids, right? I don't have any kids yet, but I've seen some of my friends' kids who have toddlers, and they're very much in this stage as they don't want to share their toys. They'll take their toys and this is mine. This is my toy, because they know that when somebody else gets something, that person feels good, but they don't feel good as an individual. But when they get what they want, they start to feel really good. But the individual suffer, but it doesn't matter because they're feeling good. And so this is the haves and the haves not stage. In the red, when you've been treated right, when you feel good, you're taking that and you're like, yes, I feel so good, and it's at the expense of others. And so eventually the red stage begins to transition because it starts to realize that everybody doesn't like them, Or there's other red leaders coming up that are challenging them and wanting to kill them and kick them out. And so it's a very it can be a very detrimental stage. And you begin to realize at that stage that, like, I can't just keep punching my sibling in the face and taking their toys from them because they don't like that. That hurts them. I keep getting disciplined by mom and dad, and they don't like me very much. And so at some point, that toddler is going to evolve out of that stage. Another example of red would be like very, very dictatorship like cultures in the world, like dictators in Africa, or even in Nicaragua, I would say, like the leader in Nicaragua. My wife lived in Nicaragua. She has family there and stuff, and their dictator there is just like, he's known to throw people into the volcano that disagree with him. He's known to just shoot people in the street. Like, there was protests happening at the universities, and they came with machine guns and just mowed a bunch of people down. Like, this kind of terrible stuff is done in the name of red dictatorship, and somebody who's thinking from that power force, that ego stage, that it doesn't matter because they're contrary to me and what I believe, and I deserve to control the city, the nation, the world in whichever way that I want to do it. Another example of this, like in Mexico, would be like the cartels. Although that they have aspect of higher stages now because they're more organized and stuff, but the idea of killing people at no expense because it benefits you is a very red stage. Okay, so in this stage they transition. Someone transitions out of the red when they begin to realize that life isn't working this way anymore, and it actually is becoming more detrimental. So like when I was caught up in my party phase and alcohol and drugs and stuff like that, like I was in a very blue but also red phase where I realized that me just continuing to go down this path of self-indulgence and pleasure and fulfilling these desires of the flesh was actually leading me into a way that life wasn't working out anymore. And so rather than living for me, I had to come out of that into living for others. And so that is when the pendulum swings back into the blue now. And the consciousness and the psychology of the person starts to value community. Now, the blue stage is really, really important because the blue stage, okay, well, with the red, 15 to 20% of the population of the world is in red still. Like, if you think of just like undeveloped parts of the world that are really in survival still, and even like in the States and different parts of Canada, like the ghetto, or like East Hastings in Vancouver, where it's really about drug use and survival or gang violence, like these are very red places. But when the pendulum swings into blue, it's no longer, you see the faults of what it was to live for yourself at the expense of others, and you come out of that into an understanding that no, the community is more important, because you start to value other people. And in the blue stage, you come into a level of order. You come into a level of under a level of authority. So the blue stage is really all about like absolute truth, rigid thought structures, and conforming to a belief system and a value system that conserves the values of the whole. Like people who say like, I just want to go back to the way things were, the good old days. Very conservative ideas of like, if you had a grandparent or an elder that's saying like the world was so much better back when this, they're still stuck back in the old ways of doing things. Some blue examples would be living like Christian, fundamental Christianity, like a church structure. Some very blue nations are like the Middle East and very intense Islam or Muslim or Judaistic faith. And just the major religions in the world are in this blue. They value community. They value putting a priest or a god or a leader above that has the power to tell you what to do. Like the Catholic religion is a very blue organization where it's become that. where they have the Pope who's the one who can hear from God, and the clergy, and they're the ones who you have to come to get your sins removed. Even Protestant churches, like, a lot of denominations like Lutheran, Episcopalian, just these more traditional, fundamental Christian churches that you would think of. Even the Baptist church would be a blue church. Alliance is kind of trending out a little bit, but it would still be more blue. It's the idea of, now I'm no longer an individual causing problems. I value being part of this group. And it's just a small group, though. It's my church, or it's like my city or my nation. It doesn't yet have the capacity to understand that other people's views are valid. And that's really important to know, because as we evolve as humans through these stages, we don't realize that every stage is valid. And the red stage hates the blue stage, and the blue stage hates the red stage. The blue stage thinks that the red stage is completely terrible, and they're lost, and they're going to hell, and they need to be saved. They need to be saved out of that red stage so they stop doing damage in the world. And that's not a bad thing. That's probably a really good thing, because the red stage can be quite destructive. And so in Nicaragua and Central America and places like that, when we see a harsh dictatorship, we see that we see the pendulum swing into very religious nations. So like Catholicism, for example, like the Mother Mary and all these things, like the Latin American countries are very, very blue and red, because they've swung out of the red phase of the harsh dictatorship that they had, and they realized that it doesn't work. So they've come under an authority in the form of religion where they begin to feel secure. They begin to feel safe. They begin to feel like they're a part of something, and that they can grow in a community having specific righteous morals and values. Okay? So it's a tremendous shift to go from one stage to another. And typically, the society that we grow up in either pulls you up or it pulls you down based on where their communal consciousness is at. And so us in North America here, we have like in Canada and the States, about 35 to 40% of the population is still in blue. Okay. And so it's a large chunk of the population that's in blue, and that's perfectly okay. Like back 30 years ago, when I was being raised by my parents, my mom was very blue, and my dad was blue in some areas, but he had moved up into orange as well. And so it's the phase where you ask your parents, like, hey, what's the answer? Like, you ask them a question about life, and they just tell you like, oh, this is why that is. And you just take it as fact, and you go, oh, okay, great, awesome. Right on. Like that's perfect. And that's just part of it, because part of your family structure, you believe that your parents have the absolute truth because you looked up to them so much. And it's absolutely amazing to be in that place. And it's a very healthy, awesome stage to be going through. Okay. So another part of blue can be like very authoritarian in their traditions, in their structure, and it's about conformity, and it's about fitting into that reality by which they say this is the one right way. In blue, there's a lot of guilt to leave that. There's a lot of fear to leave it. If you don't believe the same way as the culture or as the group that you're in, you're labeled as a heretic or as someone who's deceived. So you'll be. This is where fundamental Christianity will take a look at somebody who's gone to a higher level, and they will label you as a heretic if you don't believe the same way as them anymore. And that's why there's so many denominations, tens of thousands of denominations, because each one has the right truth and everybody else should believe like them. So it's very much a clique. It's very much the own you feel safe in like-minded people, and you don't have the ability to reason outside of your little box yet, because that is the safe box that you have, because you know the red stage that you came out of, and now this is the truth and this is the safety. So to think outside of that box again, you associate with the trouble that you were in the lower consciousness level that you were in before, whether that was in, the egotistic phase or drugs or whatever version of the world that you were in before. And so eventually in the blue, one begins to realize this is very rigid. This is very dogmatic. This is what about me? I've been serving the church for X amount of years and I've been doing this, but what about my own development? I don't seem to be getting any better. And there's kind of this awakening that happens where you start to realize my life is important too. It's great that the pastor has fed me for all these years. It's great that, this has been happening, but you start to begin to question things that is being spoken when you move into orange. And this is where we come out of the value of the group, and the pendulum swings into orange back to the individual value system again. But this time it's not the harshness and the do whatever it takes to get ahead by killing and violence and all of that in red. It's actually into the stage orange. Okay? And so orange is a very interesting stage, and it is about 25 to 30%, maybe even more, of the population of Canada and the States. So it and blue are very, very divided with half and half about what's happening in this stage. Now, one thing I forgot to mention about blue is that when it comes to politics and stuff like that, this isn't always the case, but conservative ideologies and the good old days and not changing and very traditional belief system would be a very blue idea. Whereas when we go into orange, we start to question everything that we learned as absolute truth. And the orange stage is a strong desire to win, but not through the harshness of red, but through the intellect, through the rational mind. So the orange is very much about capitalism, about materialism, about trying to live the American dream. That is moving in a very, very orange ideal and belief system. It's rooted in personal development, becoming the best version of yourself that you can. Like an example of this would be like Tony Robbins, or personal development that's really important, where you can become the best version of you. And this is a very, very awesome, healthy thing to do, because the better individuals are in a society, the better the society actually is. And so we leave behind the ideals of conformity and blue and just needing to be in this certain thing to trying to actualize yourself. And so, yes, business, free market, material success. Your belief systems and values no longer come from the absolute truth anymore that made sense in blue, but you start to value principles and ethics and the rational mind and science and technology and figuring things out in this way, which start to make sense a lot more. So this might be, somebody who's been going to church for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're just like, they start to question these things. How true is this? They start in high school, start learning about like science and evolution, and they start this makes way more sense than God breathing into dirt in the ground and creating humankind. There's like a scientific method here. The scientific method is very orange that they can follow, and it can make sense in their mind to categorize like Darwinian evolution. Like, this is how we came to being. And so we see in the stage orange that a lot of people that were in blue actually will leave and become atheists or agnostics, and this kind of thing, to pursue a life that is of benefit for them as far as monetary value, as far as living life to the fullest and best version of themselves that they can be. And so the orange is a very, very Powerful stage. It's a stage that a lot of North America is currently in right now. We can call this the modern stage, whereas the blue we could call the traditional stage. The orange stage is much more of modernism, the age of enlightenment, the technology, the industrial revolution was the beginning of this stage in this time. And so, definitely a large part of the states and technology and everything like that coming out of the orange stage. Very success, goal-oriented. Another example of that would be like Wall Street. Wall Street's a very orange idea. In orange, you largely ignore inner spirituality and anything that isn't tangible, anything that is not explainable through the rational lens is kind of discounted as something that the blue people would just have blind faith in. And so somebody who's an orange looking back at blue might think that they're dummies, that they're idiots, that they don't have a rational mind, that they are just believing blind faith, dumb luck kind of thing. Whereas somebody who's in blue, in the very religious, dogmatic sense, seeing somebody who now kind of is like, no, I believe in science, they could be like, man, they're getting deceived by the devil. They're believing in the lies of Satan that is tricking their minds into believing evolution. And Satan has grasped their minds to lead them astray from the absolute truth that we believe in. And so there's a battle between perception, every stage that goes up and every stage that's looked back upon. Okay? And so eventually at this stage, orange is a very hard stage to transcend because you are winning so much in life. You are going after the things that make you happy. I remember in my mid-20s, I went through a real orange stage where I was involved in, I was working a job as a safety coordinator and at this fire and safety company. I was doing sales there, and I was also building this home-based business for this health and wellness company afterwards. So I was working like 12, 13, 15 hours a day, and I was really going after it. I was in the gym. I won this North America-wide body transformation contest. And then after that, I joined this personal development company where we were just going on trips and we were like self-actualizing ourselves and learning principles about success and prosperity to align to in our life to be able to become the best versions of ourselves. And so I was very money focused, very focused on becoming somebody in my life and getting my value from the things that I had and the things that I did. And so that was a very orange stage for me in my life. I never let go of my blue, of my belief in God, because God had helped me come out of addiction. And so I knew that God was very, very real, and I was raised in a Baptist church growing up. So we had the traditional understanding of salvation, of heaven and hell, of all these concepts. And so what's really interesting is that if we can avoid the temptation to throw the baby out with the bathwater as we transcend through the stages, then we actualize and bring the best of the old stage into the new version. And lucky enough for me, I took the good of the blue when I went into my orange stage, and there wasn't really a conflict around letting go of my faith or anything like that, although it did begin to shift. And I did begin to think things more rationally. Whereas like before, when I was younger and I would like hear creaking in the house, like when I was really young, I'd think there were monsters or shadows or something. That would be more of the purple thinking. But then the blue explains that as, no, these are demons. This is the devil. Like there's stuff going on. And like I saw this movie called The Sixth Sense where he sees dead people, and I was really, really afraid for a number of years, like severely tormented by the idea that there was demons or ghosts like in my house. And that's what I learned in church. And so like I believed that. But when I came into the orange stage, I started to rationalize that all away. When I would hear the door creak or something move or something, I'm like, gravity is pulling on every facet of this material world, and there's invisible forces and gravity pulling on things, and things are moving. And so I started to rationalize away all of the stuff that I was kind of like in fear about, which was really, really helpful for me at that time, because I started to leave behind the torments that I had from some of the belief systems and rigidity that I had in that blue upbringing that I had. There was also a lot of good stuff in the blue upbringing though. Like when I asked Jesus into my life and felt love and connection and stuff like that, like I had a real experience, and that experience actually transcended blue. It was a real mystical experience that transcended blue with the feeling of unconditional love and all of the worry of death and stuff. But then it was explained to me through a blue lens. So then that experience was couched within the blue consciousness of my family and the consciousness of the church that we went to. And so that's important to know, is that in each different stage, you can actually have transcendent experiences that help you wake up, but it's not going to pull you out into another stage necessarily, because it's going to be interpreted by the consciousness and psychological level that you're at. And so, yeah, that's something to be aware of, and just really interesting with it. As you can tell, like this model can become very, very advanced, very deep, very wide, a lot of nuance, a lot of different facets go into this. And so it's just helpful. I'm just giving you a broad stroke of each phase so that you can kind of see, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where this person's at. And what's beautiful is that we can actually learn to see people at the stages that they're at and realize why they're there, and actually interact with them. And that doesn't really interact with them where they're at and help them come, but that doesn't really come until the tier 2 stage. The second level of stages, the tier 2. So we're gonna get there. We have one more stage to go through in the first tier in green. So why do people get out of orange? How do they transcend orange? Orange is very interesting because it thinks it's the highest stage, the rational mind. Even on Stephen or David Hawking's map of consciousness, rational thinking is at 400, which is very, very high. It's right below love, and love is 500. So rational scientists, a lot of the medical system is very orange. A lot of the belief systems in our culture, very orange. You know, the science around COVID and everything like that, that's actually kind of getting up into green, to be honest, and we'll get there. I know a lot of people aren't going to really like that, but the scientific, like orange would be, yeah, like the science, pharmaceutical industry, the doctors and medical system that we currently have that is designed to really, really help people in different facets overcome things from a strictly pharmacological, scientific, chemical level. Take this pill, overcome that, without any understanding of like consciousness or any transcended spiritual type stuff. It's all the hard science. It's all the rational stuff. It's all the going after the success in your life. But when you've done this long enough, you begin to see the limitations of it. And like, you know, have you ever met someone or known someone? It's like, you know, they just made so much money or they worked so much. They're like, I don't value this anymore. That there starts to be limitations that happen in orange. And the pendulum swings back out of the individual needs of me succeeding into the communal, the group again. And now we're into green. And so green is the community stage, but we can call this almost like the global stage. So unlike blue, the last community level or group level, it's not just about me and my church or me and my city or me and my nation. Green actually takes a genuine interest in the whole of the planet. So green is very interested in activism, social justice warriors, these kind of movements. As far as political ideologies are concerned, green would be very liberal, like the Bleeding Heart liberals or the snowflakes or things like that. And see, my conservative brothers and sisters aren't going to like this. And I'll tell you that I lean in the political slant towards conservatism, and we'll see why that makes sense in later levels. But in this green level, it's a necessary evolution of our consciousness to go through. So green moves out of Green moves out of the individual person into, okay, we need to save the world. Stop polluting the world, stop building technology, stop doing all of this. Can't you see that we're cutting down the trees and killing the dolphins and killing the whales and polluting the seas and all this stuff, which is really, really good stuff. But on the planet, there's very few healthy green organizations, actual healthy green groups, because the tendency in green is to take on the blue ideology of what we're doing now, even though the focus is bigger, that we are more inclusive and empathetic to these fringe minorities of like Black Lives Matter or the LGBTQ movement, right? These at their core are beautiful things. Yeah, of course Black Lives Matter. Of course all races are equal and Black lives are valuable. And in Canada here, the Indigenous lives matter, right? Like it's a no-brainer to somebody who's at the green level or higher. But what tends to happen is that because the orange level that says, no, I'm fighting back, we need to open the oil sands, we need to do this, the green backlash very hard against the orange because the orange doesn't operate in empathy really. They're really about making money and doing things for themselves and the greed there. So the green backlash very hard in irrationalism to counteract the rationalism in orange, and they create a very irrational, illogical, dogmatic belief system that anybody who's not, that could change the world, but anybody who's not in alignment with that is now other than and now separated, and we need to cut their head off and cancel them. So cancel culture is a very green idea, but it's a toxic green. So it's tough because there's not too many examples of a healthy green established thing that's going on right now. Protests are a very green thing. I would say in Canada, there's an awesome movement going on right now that at the foundation is very green, but it's consisting of a lot of people that are in blue and in orange. And so that's why it's so cool, because it's truckers, it's the working class people, it's those that are very fundamental Christians that are in the blue, that are taking form in this trucker, but it's all non-violent. It's all non-persecuting. Right? And so there's a beautiful, everything that's going on with the truckers convoy right now is a beautiful expression of an empathetic green that is good for the rights of everybody in Canada, not just the truckers. It started with the truckers, but it grew. It started as a blue, just my group, but then they're like, no, it's for everybody. And it turned into a green idea very quickly. And so that's really amazing. As far as spirituality in the green can look like somebody who's gone through the blue and been in the religious church or organization like that, and then they come into like almost an agnosticism or atheism. Those people, or a questioning period type thing, they might come out of the blue, which could be like 30-fold Christianity. And they might come into a 60-fold expression of Christianity, which is about the gifts of the Spirit and the Holy Spirit that can make you pray in tongues and that you can heal the sick. And there's supernatural power in God. There's experiences that are bigger than the rational mind, that the rational mind can't explain anymore. And so a lot of people who have been raised in a fundamental blue religion will come into a greater expression of that religion in green. Also, what can happen in coming into green is that if somebody's been a fundamental Christian, a Baptist their whole life, and then they let go of their belief system in orange and they travel and make it through orange and they, work and make money and they become the best version of themselves. And they're like, that Baptist stuff was kind of primitive. Like, I'm glad I got baptized and everything, but pretty primitive. When they come through orange into green, they might realize that, oh my gosh, there's so much more to spirituality. And they might start taking an interest in like crystals or energy healing or like the chakras and the energy system in the body. And some of these more new age type ideas come through in green, and like meditation. But in green, it's still a very, I want to say low isn't the right word, but a less advanced. They still don't have the true essence of the of the union of the divine of all that is. It's a lot of different practices and a lot of different things. Like a green church might be like, I'm going to pray in tongues for like 10 hours straight, because like that is awesome. There's a little bit of yellow in there too, of like the pushing and making it happen. Some other examples of green churches would be like affirming theology. There's a lot of churches now that are affirming the LGBTQ movement and making sure that these fringe minority groups are loved and accepted, and there's compassion towards them, and they're fully embracing them into the fold. So they're not valuing this is where dogmatic beliefs start to break down on a small scale, although large dogmatic ideas are embraced. So like the idea of like needing somebody to get saved, or like needing the LGBTQ people to repent from their homosexuality or their sin, wouldn't be a green idea, really. They don't need to conform to that absolute truth anymore. That's a blue idea of needing to conform to that truth. And see, my blue brothers and sisters, and even some that are in blue and orange and green in the Christian church, might not like to hear this. Because the reality is that is such a safeguard to their worldview, to the box in which they believe God operates in, that to think outside of what we've been trained in and told, because the scriptures of the Bible is the absolute truth, and we have to take this 100% literally, or else we're deceived, or else we're going to hell, or there's consequences. Very, very blue thinking. And so a blue church might look at a green church that's doing, say, the gifts of the Spirit or something like that, and they might say that's demonic, that died with the apostles. Or they might look at somebody who's including homosexuality, even though they might not in their heart fully agree with homosexuality, they're still including them and embracing them. They might be like, they're deceived, you should be condemning them, right? And so from this perspective, each level's at war with the other ones. Whereas when you come through and you're at green, you're going to look at the blues as very intolerant people. You're going to look at a blue church and be like, I can't believe they don't love and feel compassion towards this community like we do. Like, they're bad people. And you'll label the blue people as really, really terrible people that don't actually care or love people, and that are rooted in dogmatism. Whereas the rational people in orange looking at green are going to be like, these bleeding heart liberals, these people are airy-fairy, and they totally don't make any sense, and like the economy's not going to work with, like, when they're living in this way, and their ideals are just crap. You can't live in a world that does this. Whereas the greens are looking at the orange and labeling them as intolerant, labeling them as people that are just not good people, that are destroying the world. And so there's a huge conflict in between these two stages. And so other words to describe green are relativistic. No one is marginalized in it. They're very sensitive, very feeling, very empathetic based, caring for all beings. So some example of green would be like veganism. Like I'm going to become a vegan because this is the way that I'm going to save the planet. I'm no longer contributing to destroying of animals, to the destruction of the rainforest and all this stuff. But in green, it's very easy to become toxic. And we've seen this in the vegan community largely, where it's like, if you're not doing what I'm doing, then you're killing the world and you're terrible. And they shame those that are eating meat. And so is a very, very delicate balance in green, because there's still that connotation of judgment. It still has the potential to be a very, very judgmental stage. Well, whereas when we move up to tier 2 is the massive shift in consciousness that happens. So in green, about 10 to 15% of the world's in green right now. Okay? Or so not the world. About the world. But see, more so in Canada and the States, especially in Canada and like Sweden or like the Scandinavian countries, they're much more green. They might have 50% in green. The Liberal government in Canada right now is very, very green, albeit unhealthy green, but still very green, because at the heart of the ideas that are coming through, whether we want to call them propaganda or whatever it is about COVID and the mandates and stuff, like I wish the stories that they were telling were true. That COVID was a really, really severe, terrible disease and that we need to protect everyone. Because what if it was? What if people were dropping dead on the streets and they're like, we need to help people. We need to create these mandates and have a society that will actually live and survive where people aren't getting sick, where people aren't dying and everyone's protected. And it wasn't about the fear, but it was actually about the love and the wanting to help the people rather than the toxicity of the green and the fear trying to oppose what they believe is best in order to take care of the whole. See, because once again, green is about taking care of the whole country, the whole world. We need to do a global lockdown. We need to shut down every church, right? For the betterment of the whole. And so this is where conservatives and people that are more traditional can look and be like, this is bullshit, and throw spiral dynamics completely out of the window, because how can the liberal ideas be more advanced consciously than us? And the reality of it is, if you think about the word conservative and liberal, it's like conserve is all about conserving, keeping the old traditions, where the liberal is about liberty. It's about moving on to a more free expression. And they're both very valuable. We need both of these aspects in order to have a high functioning society. Because we can't just go off into creating all these craziness and new gender pronouns and all that stuff. And just create a completely new society without any old foundation of the way that it operates, or else it wouldn't operate and it would just fizzle out and be destroyed. But we also can't just stay completely in the old and stay stuck in rigidity and blind believing in certain things, because that's the way that it's always been done. And so there is a place of healthy green in the middle where it's like, you know what? There is people that are going through certain experiences that I may not understand, that do want to identify as different things. And so can we be compassionate to these people? Absolutely. Like there's a healthy place there without labeling them as some fringe, terrible people. And then there's a healthy response from that community to be like, you know what, we're all people, we can get along together. But unfortunately, that balance in green is very few and far between, and in our world at least, and it's not happening very, very harmonically at this point in history. But I believe that as we evolve out of blue, as countries come out of blue into orange, and that we evolve through orange and into green, I believe there'll be less reason to have these kind of battles, because we'll be taking a lot of the good from the stages that we've come through and implementing it, what didn't work in the past and what's working in the future and what's working now to create a better future. But see, this now swings into yellow. And what I was talking about there is a very yellow idea, because yellow swings back to the individual again. Okay, and so less than 5% of the world's population is in yellow. I think it's closer to 1 to 3% is actually in yellow at this time. Although there is mass awakenings happening, and I would anticipate that many people are coming out of that now into coming into yellow, coming out of green. Because see, in green, there's a lot of protesting. There's a lot of trying to fix things without results. It's like a lot of passion and energy and emotion goes into it, but there's no results that it ever does. And so after you've campaigned enough and you've done all this stuff enough, and there has been no results because it's been out of a spirit of fear, it's been out of a spirit of control, it eventually breaks down and you come out of that, or you take everything that you learned in green and it's been a very great experience and you've become more inclusive, but you come back to yourself. The pendulum swings back to the individual and you go, okay, now how can I implement everything that I know to create a better world, to create a better version of myself? So yellow is very interesting because for the first time on the spiral in this second tier, it can see all the other stages from beige all the way to green, and it can be like, wow, all of those were valuable in creating who I am. All of those stages were essential to create the individual that I am, and how great is that? You know, like I needed the personal development. I needed that foundation in faith. I needed that opening of my mind to the everything going on in the world. I needed that strength to fight and get through that addiction, or to you know, survive when I was young in red, right? So you see every part of each stage as valuable. And this is a tremendous leap in consciousness. This is a tremendous stage to get to. Because once you get to the yellow stage, you can see everything below it and value it. There's no longer the divisions and the separations that are in it, okay? And so it's really, really interesting. Very, very interesting in the yellow stage, okay? The yellow stage is called interdependence. It's known as like the integral stage. It's known for systemic thinking. So it's known for taking problems that are maybe a green problem, an orange problem, and creating a system to be able to solve those problems. Okay, so yellow is not just about the orange of the hard science and the rationalism, but you've picked up some of the more esoteric, airy-fairy concepts maybe in green, and you've combined that with what you know from blue and the foundation that you had in your faith there, and you realize, like, how does this science go together with this spirituality? And it's like the merger of science and spirituality. And this is where we come into like the quantum model, the quantum understanding of reality, really understanding energy and frequency, but not just in a airy-fairy type way, but that you are actually intimately involved in creating with your energy, with your frequency, and how it's like the connection between on earth as it is in heaven. It's not just the airy-fairy, it's like how it tangibly relates to my life, how it relates to creating society in a way that everybody can benefit from this. So it's also about making money, and it's also about benefiting and growing and stuff, but it doesn't have that toxic, do it at the expense of other people in the environment. So an orange business, just to contrast, would be like, I'm going to make money, I'm going to make loads of money, and it doesn't matter who I hurt along the way or if I destroy the environment. So like Coca-Cola, for example. Coca-Cola, very destructive on the planet. Tons of garbage. The product makes you sick, fat, and destroys your body and your brain. And they're making money, and it destroys the environment. Okay, same with McDonald's, fast food restaurants. These typically are very orange businesses because it's all about making money at the expense of people's health, at the expense of people's livelihood and well-being. And then it also adds pollution and stuff to the environment, and they're not giving back at all. But we see a lot of businesses that are starting to implement green ideals and marry it with a business model, like, so they give back to or plant a tree now every time you buy something, or they donate to charity. So consciousness is moving up in business, and it's no longer a win-lose-lose, but in yellow businesses are all about win-win-win. So you win because you're making money, you win because you're providing a great product and benefiting other people with it, that is making them smarter, that is making them better, that is making them healthier, and it actually cleans up or helps the environment or the world at the same time. So there's a huge difference between businesses that are operating in yellow and businesses that were operating back in the orange and the greed. People with yellow thinking will not act and do something that will benefit themselves if it will damage them or the world. Okay? So this is a very important thing to know, that you know, like, if you're in orange and you're looking at somebody in yellow and you're going to go out and you're really excited about doing this thing, but there's detrimental consequences on the environment or other people, and you're saying to your friend, yo, let's go do this, and they're like, no, man, like, I don't really want to do that. That's not resonating with me. And you're like, an orange person will look at a yellow person and be like, man, they're a pushover. Like, they're a pussy. Don't they want to make money? Don't they want to win? Don't they want to do this? yellow people still want to win, but they don't want to win at the expense of other people, at the expense of somebody else. Because in yellow, you're beginning to understand the totality of all that is and the interconnection of it, although it's not fully realized in this yellow stage. The mystical reality of oneness and non-duality is not realized fully at the yellow stage, although we're starting to dip our fingers into that stage. So a really awesome example of yellow, somebody that has helped me come up into yellow over the last couple years, was Joe Dispenza. In 2018, I was introduced to Joe Dispenza's teachings, and I was very in a green mindset around some things. I was okay with energy, but I still really had the fundamental religious Christianity that was deeply ingrained in me. But as I started being opened up to a greater level of mind, and I started to continue to go within myself and take things to God, it's like my wineskin began to shift dramatically. And then Joe Dispenza came in. And what Joe Dispenza takes is he takes hard sciences. So he will take very hard sciences and he will marry them with some of the soft sciences. So he will take like physics and biology and different sciences like that, and he will marry them with psychology. And so like he's taking neuroscience and marrying it with quantum physics and epigenetics and how our body's changing. And he marries these two things together to show how the spirit interacts with the physical, how the body interacts with the mind. And he's created this amazing model of mind-body connection where people are coming into what like spontaneous remissions and what would be considered miraculous healings that in the blue phase would just be chalked up to the sky god doing a miracle. Now in yellow, we're starting to learn the science of miracles. So like when you go to heaven, like to my blue friends, when you go to heaven and you ask God, or like you ask Jesus or God, like, hey, how did you walk on water? How did you perform these miracles? He's not going to just say, I don't know, it was a miracle. Right? So there's an explanation, there's a scientific method for these more hidden, esoteric, spiritual type things that is a tangible expression. And so this yellow phase is really exciting because it creates an understanding, a model, if you will, that helps people understand the expanded out there topics into tangible evidence now. So yellow is a really, really fascinating stage. In yellow, for the first time, you don't need to have a box that all of your belief systems make sense in. In the yellow stage, see like a lot of people coming into this next stage of 100-fold out of the church, out of the charismania, out of all of these kind of more maybe new age type stuff. And yellow is where it begins to get actualized for you. We're a real practice of connecting with the divine nature and who you are in life and making that your best reality really comes to the forefront and center. Believing that your thoughts and your emotions are really dictating your reality and having an understanding of why that's true through the quantum model. Also, in this stage, like this whole model that I'm explaining to you of spiral dynamics is a very yellow model. It helps us understand the evolution of consciousness and psychology in a way that we can start to look at other people and be like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, when I was at this stage in my life and going to that Baptist church, I was really in the blue phase. When I was really going after business and working all those hours, yeah, I was in the orange phase. You know, like when and like another thing that I forgot to mention about the green phase is something that starts to open up in the green phase that isn't as taboo anymore is psychedelics. So psychedelics start to emerge kind of like in the hippie age, when like in the 1950s and 60s and like love and peace and all that. Like that was a very green movement that came to America that started to bring the consciousness level up, like free love and starting to do acid and LSD and mushrooms and these kind of things. And I'm not advocating that, like it's totally your personal choice if you want to do those things or not. But if somebody in orange does a bunch of psychedelics, like that's really business focused, really, and doesn't believe in God, or it seems like they're an atheist or something, they're going to come out of that believing in some kind of spirituality, believing in something that's greater than themselves. Psychedelics are a way that people can actually elevate their consciousness very quickly into different stages of consciousness. And that's why in the conservative, like the very blue phase, like psychedelics, like the laws of the land, psychedelics in the States and Canada are considered like a class 1 drug, like heroin, when really it's not even close to the same compound or anything like that. But to the conservative mind that doesn't want change, these psychedelics have the power to really open things up, really shift belief systems and reality in a way that is greater. And so I actually attribute, when I was, in high school and different parts of my youth, I dabbled in mushrooms and psychedelics. And I attribute that to actually opening my mind to be able to see things from a more expanded reality now, looking back. I wouldn't recommend anyone just dive into them and start doing them, but hey, I can say that was part of my journey, and I do believe that it did have a positive impact in my life overall, especially when I was in the midst of alcoholism and doing harder drugs that weren't good. Psychedelics actually brought an opening to my mind and an expansion out of that narrow red into something much greater. So very interesting. So yes, another example of somebody in the yellow would be like a yellow thinker, someone who's a systems thinker, would be Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein was putting together advanced quantum physics. The guys who invented quantum field theory, Max Planck, these guys, they are definitely yellow thinkers. More mainstream guys now, like, what's his name? Greg Braden, who talks about heart coherence and these things. Bruce Lipton, who talks about the science of biology and how consciousness is affecting biology, right? Once again, consciousness or spirit affecting physical matter. So very, very important and very cool in the yellow stages. Yellow stages can integrate complex systems with ease. They value knowledge and competency over rank, power, status, or authority. So if a bunch of yellow people got together and there was like one who was like very versed in like metaphysics and consciousness, one who was very versed in like traditional medicine and pharmacology, and one who was really versed in like natural modalities and naturopathy and like different herbs and stuff like that, like they would all come together and be like, okay, what is the best solution to treat this patient as a team? Yellow thinking is like, how can we take all the modalities and bring them together in order to benefit someone perfectly? Whereas, an orange thinker would be like, we just got to cut that tumor out and radiate them and give them drugs. And that's the way to do it. Whereas as somebody in green might be like, let's give you a sound bath and put some moon charged crystals around you and do some chanting, right? Whereas in the yellow, it's like, what? Let's hit it with both. Let's figure out, like we've been seeing how these like the sound and the frequencies and the sound baths and crystals are actually doing benefit in people's lives. Don't really understand it, but let's figure out the science behind that, because it is working scientifically somehow. And so it's like taking all of the concepts, all of the paradigms, and having a big view to be able to bring the best solution. And that's what Canada needs right now in this time. We need a yellow thinker. We need a yellow politician to emerge that can bring complex ideas and boil them down to an understanding that's best for everyone. Not just taking conservative and not just taking liberal, but taking ideas from both to be able to merge it, okay? So now moving into turquoise. So turquoise is a very interesting stage. I am not through yellow, and I just want to say that people can be at different phases. Like I have facets of me that are still in like orange or green. We're not 100% in one stage or not, but like I'm split through different stages in the way that I think and I feel about different topics. But because I've entered into the yellow stage, I can be aware of that now. Like one sign that you're in the yellow stage is that you're beginning, from a Christian perspective, is that you're beginning to try to comprehend great paradigms that seem to be in contradiction. And it might bother you, but you learn to live with it. Like you put it on the shelf. Like for example, one of the paradigms, the conflicting paradigms that I really had to go through was that, okay, now I'm learning that I'm a quantum co-creator with Christ, that I'm creating and manifesting my reality, that consciousness is very powerful, that I am one with the divine nature. But also the Bible talks about us being predestined before the foundation of the world to fulfill certain good works. And some of the things that happened to me in my life that I signed up for. So I had to reconcile like destiny and fate with me creating my own destiny and reality. And for a while, it was a real struggle when I was coming into yellow. I would flip back and forth. I'd be like, no, God's in control. He's going to bring my prophetic words to pass in his timing, and it's all on him. And then I would go back to, no, I'm creating my reality, and I need to meditate and manifest these things in my life. And it was back and forth. And now I'm in this beautiful place of it's both. And that's totally okay, right? And so it's very, very interesting. In yellow, you can begin to comprehend these contradictory paradigms, and you realize that, maybe I'm walking through on a path down a life journey where I've chosen to explore a certain theme. And in that theme, I get to create whatever I want as I go down that road in that theme, right? And so expanded topics begin to start to make sense, and they begin to come together, though you don't need to fully understand them, and you realize that you're never going to fully understand them. That being said, also in yellow, like I remember like when I first started learning about this, like back 10 years ago, it was like, man, like, yeah. And I was like in blue when I was learning about it, which shows I was open enough on some level to see, and I had a kind of a calling, if you will, or a desire to go down this road. But I remember being like, man, if I could ever get to the second tier, like yellow or turquoise, then like I would just have no problems in life. And I want to say that, like, I can't speak for turquoise, but like I think turquoise is just like a completely different realm altogether. And we're going to talk about it in a second. But in yellow, like we're very much like, it's still very much humanistic. It's still very much, we still have problems. There's still things that we're working through in life. And like in humility, I can admit that, like just because like someone in yellow can explain a topic that's expanded like this doesn't mean that there's no more problems in life. And there's like everything's great and right all of the time. It's the ability to be able to see it all and accept it though, and be okay with it, which is really key. So moving into turquoise is less than 1% of the population. Okay, so turquoise is very interesting because, see, the concept of turquoise now, you're swinging back out of the individual and like how I relate in this space-time reality, how I relate in this quantum realm, to actually becoming one with all that is, to transcending the idea of you as a separate self and living in full harmony. Turquoise is like the harmony phase. Turquoise is like the ascended master phase. Like Yeshua, Jesus in the Bible, like he was a turquoise consciousness. I and my Father are one. But we also see him battling with it sometimes, going, apart from the Father, I can do nothing. And seeing him in his own humanity, the Son of Man and the Son of God, going back and forth, being like, I can do all things. Like, me and my Father are one. All things are possible for those who believe. And he did all these amazing miracles and everything. And he spent most of his time in turquoise. But we also see that he had to relate to humankind. So he was still conscious of this being the separate individual. And we see that as evidenced on the cross when he died. Forgive me, Father, or Father, why have you forsaken me? So he took on and understood what it meant to be human, what it meant to walk through all of these levels of consciousness, from being a young kid all the way up. The Bible says that he grew in stature with God and man. He grew. He psychologically, in this earth body, grew in consciousness. Okay? From a 2-year-old, from the being a little egoic 3-year-old, to wanting and needing, to overcoming that, to going into the Jewish culture and the synagogues and learning and the teachings of the Pharisees. And he had I would say that he had a big blue phase because the culture back then was primarily blue, very rooted in religion and Pharisaical, Judaistic laws, rituals, rites. He knew that stuff better than anybody. So he went through that phase of consciousness, right? And so he transcended and he walked through. He was a carpenter, he had an orange stage where he was very much about his father Joseph's business. He wasn't just about his heavenly father's business. Previously in his life, he was about his father Joseph's business, about making things happen, about the materialism, about being a woodworker, right? So he went through all of these paradigms and these consciousness shifts, right? And he came in and he I think he went through them a lot quicker than the average person, to be honest. But he was a turquoise enlightened being, a master, fully divine on this planet, right? Showing a blue culture, turquoise teachings. And so a lot of the stuff that we've learned in Christianity and stuff that we read in the Bible, we're reading in a blue lens. And we take that blue lens and we say, this is the absolute truth. And we miss the mystical reality behind it. So turquoise is really coming into a deeply, deeply amazing mystical expression. It is acknowledging that yourself, while there's a separate component, you are one with all that is. You are one with the totality. You begin to see the interconnectedness of all things, how the business and the industrial parts of humanity are interacting with the environment, and how the oxygen goes into the leaves, and how the pollution and carbon dioxide goes into the leaves and the trees, and the trees expel the oxygen, and that helps humanity and animals. And it's like we know these concepts intellectually, but literally becoming the divine energetic source of all that is, that permeates everything, and having the consciousness level that there is no right and wrong, that it all is one. And this is a very hard concept to understand for the rational mind. This to orange, it looks like complete bullshit and utter rubbish. This gets confused to somebody who's like in the magical phase of like purple. But the reality is that magical reality is the essence of who we are. And so this is not just talking about it, not just preaching about it, but this is becoming that tangible love, becoming that tangible oneness, becoming that divinely inspired, enlightened being, the light of the world. Like Jesus was so in tune with the source of divinity inside of himself that he was able to transfigure. It's not like God struck him with lightning and he transfigured. No, he dematerialized because his body started vibrating at such a high frequency that he transcended the physical form. Like blood is actually congealed light. Scientists know now that blood is congealed light. So moving into turquoise is moving beyond what the rational mind even can conceive of or think is possible, and moving beyond just the ideas in the green of these different practices and stuff like that, and doing spirituality instead of being spirituality. It is really self-actualizing so much in yellow that you become all it is. Whereas in orange, and throughout your life, we built an ego for ourselves, an egoic version of the separate self, of the individual identity of where we are. Whereas when you come into green and then yellow and eventually turquoise, you're actually letting go of that individual separate self, and you're like dismantling that egoic entity that you thought you were, where you come into turquoise and you're fully no more that egoic entity at all, but you're actually one with the divine. You're one with all that is, in a way that transcends physical language. The words that I'm speaking fall short of this, and I've had glimpses of this turquoise realm. That's why I can talk about it. But I can't tell you what it's like to be fully turquoise, but I can tell you that it does exist, and it is a realm that is there and available for consciousness. Now, there's another realm beyond turquoise called coral. I honestly don't know anything about coral. I can't speak on it. I don't know what it would be like. I don't know what the facets or the characteristics of it are at all. But it's very, very interesting. Very interesting to consider that there's something beyond the all that isness of turquoise, that I'm just beginning to taste of different glimpses. So turquoise is the great sages. It's the people that are very, very highly advanced in their spiritual practices. You might find ascended masters in the Himalayas that are turquoise, that are just meditating, that don't even eat anymore. Like breatharianism, that have transcended the need for food. Like that's a very turquoise idea, I think, where like Jesus even spoke, like man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. His disciples near the well are like, yo, are you eating? He's like, I got food you know nothing of. Like he understood the yellow concepts of the energy and what Eastern cultures would call the prana, or, Holy Spirit, that energetically gives life to our bodies. Jesus was able to actualize that and live that. And then he came back after, and they're like, is he a ghost? Like, did he eat some food? And he ate some fish with them. And he didn't need to. He had transcended to a completely different level of beingness that was beyond, right? And so these are real things. These are tangible things, but they don't make sense to the previous concepts of reality. Because for somebody in blue who's very fundamental Christian to hear me talking about yellow or turquoise, you're just a complete heretic. You've left behind everything that is absolute truth in the salvation, talking about oneness. You're gone. You're deceived. So see, when we come to these levels, we need to be able to look at those that are in those levels still, even though we're friends with a lot of them and we've walked through the stages ourselves. We need to not allow the fiery darts of their words and their feelings and their labels and their judgments dictate who we are, because we are moving on to the perfection. We are moving on to a greater understanding of the nature of reality of God and who we are. Okay? So turquoise is largely about acknowledging and viewing everything as the one and experiencing everything as the one. Okay? So, very, very interesting stuff. Very few people in the world are actually mainly in turquoise. I don't think I know any personally. I would not consider myself a turquoise at all. I've just had little glimpses of it through mystical experiences and different things like that. So now I want to talk about how you can evolve your consciousness. The things that have worked for me, the things that are working for other people, and what has been shown to evolve your psychological state from one stage to another. Because the reality is this. Typically, say you're born into a culture that is blue, you're very rarely going to evolve past blue. So look at the Muslims in the Middle East and how they think that large majorities of them believe that Hollywood or materialism in America is of the devil. It deserves to be killed, right? That expression of life is unacceptable, right? And so the society that we're born in, if we're born in America or Canada, we are largely in large facets of the population are in orange and green. So we, by the time we're in our late teens, early 20s, we're going to be in blue and yellow, orange. And depending upon how much we do certain things, we're going to go through them. And it's just where we were born. Whereas if you were born in the Amazon rainforest, you're going to be beige, and then you're going to be in purple, and you're going to be largely in purple. And you might need to deal with some other, in your magical thinking, and you're going to be dealing with some other tribes that are red that want to kill you, right? So you very different climate, very different psychological level and understanding. Okay, so some things that I've seen in my life now, knowing what I know about this model, that have really worked for me, that have helped. I mentioned psychedelics. Okay, psychedelics were something that opened my mind up and my consciousness for these things to come through, for sure. But here's some other things that I would recommend more of. That's totally a personal thing, but all these other things that I'm going to talk about are things that really, really do help, and they're beneficial, and there's no adverse side effects or anything like that. One is travel the world. Go to different cultures that may seem primitive to you. Like in 2019, like me and my wife went to some we went to some remote places in Africa, and we stayed in like straw huts or like sleeping under the stars in villages that were steeped in witchcraft. Like really, really steeped in witchcraft, where witch doctors were coming and casting spells, and then a large part of the other culture was blue, where they had just been like given fundamental Christianity. And so knowing this, I went on this trip to be able to help this culture evolve from blue from red to blue and be a better blue establishment. See, because if you come in with a turquoise idea to a red or a blue, it's not going to make sense. There's not going to be any understanding that happens there. So the best thing that we can do is we can give the person or the culture that next level up into where they're going. So when I went there, when we went there to help live with them, love them, pray for them, preach the gospel. And I knew very well, I hadn't fully I hadn't really understood turquoise or yellow much yet, but I was still in green and yellow when I went a bit. And so I understood that they had a consciousness level that if I started talking to them about energy and quantum, it wasn't going to relate. And I had to catch myself a couple times in talking to them because there was stuff that their translator just didn't even have words for. It just, the value systems weren't the same. Like I remember comparing when God spoke to me and saying, Dan, no more pop can Jesus one day. And he just meant like no more fast food spirituality, no more just praying a prayer and getting out. Like I want you to sit and eat and commune with the Spirit and receive my spiritual nutrients into your life and body. And so I shared this like no more pop can Jesus, whereas in their culture, like to have a can of Coke was like the best possible thing that they could have had, and so it didn't relay. And so I realized right away when I was there that I had to be conscious with the way that I was relaying information. So I had to put myself in their shoes, in their understanding level. And I'm not saying that like somebody in Africa is less than or worse or stupider or dumber. Like some of them are way smarter than me. But the reality is where their cultural and society psychologically has grown to, based off suppression, based off however history is unfolded in that part of the world, we need to be able to see and meet them where they're at. And the difference between yellow and green here is that green would be like we need to help them change, right? We need like a blue will go in and like try to change the whole culture. A green will be like, okay, we need to love them and support them and give them what they need. But a yellow is like, hey, let's love them, support them, give them what they need, but not in a dogmatic way. And let's help plant the seeds that will help them become a better blue or a less violent red, and help them come out of that into the next stage. And so that's what we did there. I preached a very fundamental message about the cross when I was there, about the power of God, about the power to overcome the devil and witchcraft there. And it went over very well. And I gave the salvation call for many people to come into the knowledge of Christ. And it was a beautiful expression. And it's all truth there. And it's great. But it's because I'm speaking to them much differently than I would be speaking to a bunch of people who are in a drumming circle that are doing psychedelics. Do you see what I'm saying? Because to try to get them to come to salvation through the cross or Jesus, it wouldn't be an expression that they would recognize. And so I would have to speak the language that they spoke. Just like Paul said, I become all things to all people. Because Paul had the understanding. He had an advanced consciousness. He not only had the very religious blue that he had understood all the pharisaical stuff, but he had come into the orange of becoming the best version of that. The highest, most personally developed Pharisee that you could be. And then he came out of that and transitioned into green and into these higher understandings where he had glimpses of speaking about the oneness of the one Spirit In him we live and move and have our being. The Christ that consists and holds all things together, right? And so that's the language that I would use speaking to people that are in the new age. I would speak to them on the level that they would understand, in terms that they would understand. And so traveling the world is a very amazing way to help you see where different people are at. And I'm not just talking about going and lying on the beach and being in a resort. Like I'm talking about intimately being involved with the cultures of the world and getting to know where they're at and seeing where they're at and comparing and contrasting your belief systems to theirs and seeing the dynamics that they have in their culture. Like for Africa, for example, the witchcraft is very red. You don't do what I say, I'm going to curse you. I'm going to do this. And people were living in fear of the red tyranny that's coming through the witchcraft, because the witch doctors would kill people and they would die. Whereas now we're bringing in a blue ideology that you're safe. You're safe with this authority that God has given. It's more powerful than that lower vibration. And you get them into an understanding of God loves them and that Jesus died for them and all of that good stuff that can keep them into a culture of a church where now they're strong because they're in a community and they're not worried about being taken out by the witch doctors anymore. And so you can see these dynamics play out in the culture. Okay? And so traveling and experiencing culture is a very, very awesome way and quick way to help transcend your consciousness. See, like if you're a hillbilly living in the rural South or like some local town in Alberta where I live here or wherever, and you've never been outside your local area, you're going to have a level of consciousness that just meets that area. You're not going to have a wide view. You're not going to understand what different cultures and people, different races and colors and people are coming from. So you're going to label them as different and you're going to label them as bad and you're going to try to convert them. So it's about raising the consciousness level and understanding that. So the first thing I said to raise the consciousness can be psychedelics. Second is going into cultures, going in and traveling. Okay. The third is going within yourself. Not only can we experience different facets of the world by going without, but by going within and dedicating a deep meditation practice, a communion with the divine nature. Not the typical prayer of praying and asking God for things, although there's a place for that and that's great. But I'm talking about deep mystical union, connecting with that part of you that transcends you and consistently doing that. That is a surefire way to raise your consciousness, because the more you connect with all that is, the more you connect with source, the more you're going to be shaped and to be able to see who you're not. And as you see who you're not and all of the egoic things that you've believed and walked through, you're going to transcend through those levels very quickly. I have spent large facets of time in stillness and in silence. And when I was in the church doing this, and I would talk to even pastors about this sometimes, they would think that I was crazy because they're like, that doesn't sound normal. Like, what do you mean you're just sitting in your closet for days? So the reality is it's just like, that's one way, because it seems out of the box, and it is, that you can transcend your consciousness and go through phases quite quickly. See, most people might transition. If you're born in a blue culture, you might transition into orange. Most people, where they're at as like in their mid-20s or like 30, that's where they're going to be the rest of their life. Like you might change one stage in that last like 50 years of your life, because that's just the way that the psyche works. When you're old, you think that you have it, you're stuck in your ways, and you don't do it unless you're very, very involved in orange and really personal developing yourself. Then eventually you might dissolve and go to green, right? And so it's just really interesting that we can do these things that are actually intangible things, going within, communion with the divine nature, having a perspective shift through culture or an external substance. Now, Another way that has been very, very powerful for helping me shift my consciousness that I didn't realize about, that actually obliterated blue for me. Like literally, like blue, like this gate started to give me glimpses of turquoise. I hadn't had glimpses yet, but it paved the way for that. And that was extended water fasting, and combined with communion with the divine nature, combined with turning off the TV, shutting out the external world, and dedicating going within. I did a 44-day water fast back in 2017, and it destroyed, coming out of that fast, like I was expecting to have miraculous and be taken to heaven, but it was all through my dogmatic lens of like blue and a little bit of green of what was possible. But what happened is it actually dismantled my blue worldview after. All the things that I thought that I knew about myself and believing in God in a certain specific dogmatic way actually started to dissolve after that. And it was a very painful process that I had to walk through. I don't recommend people doing that if you don't want your life to be turned upside down. But I was on a fast track program. Like I was just like one that wanted more of God, wanted more of the nature of reality at any cost, more of truth. And I realized a lot of the absolute truths that I had in blue were actually not absolute truths. They were just absolute truths for me at that time. And so that dissolving of that old wineskin was very tough and very challenging, but it happened nonetheless. And so water fasting is a very powerful way, but water fasting combined with the purity of communion with the divine nature, with no objectives, can really, really turn your world upside down and really bring you through the stages very quickly. Like every time I do a water fast, even if it's like 3 days or 5 days, it's like there's always like an upliftment and a clarity and an understanding that I didn't have before that's come to me. And so those are 4 ways that you can really, really transcend your consciousness and grow through stages quickly. In my adult life, since I've been 18, I would say I have gone from like majority blue and orange up to green and into yellow, and then had tastes of turquoise. So like that's in like the last like 14 years of my life. Like I've gone through like 4 stages type thing, and I've experienced and tasted each thing, and it's like it's crazy. And I wouldn't recommend this journey to everyone, because in that way it's like I didn't spend enough time in the orange phase. Like, yeah, there's huge benefits with revelation and insight and things that I have, but I didn't have enough time in that orange phase to actualize a rational business of making a lot of money that was going to support me moving forward fully in the way that I would have liked to be supported now. Right. And so now I'm now that I'm more in the yellow, which I believe is actually the way that it was meant to be, because now I'm not thinking about trying to do things at the expense of other people and get them to buy my packages no matter what. But now I'm actually creating something that I believe is beneficial and adding content to the world in a way which is win-win-win. Right. So that's where the world's going, and it's very exciting. Let me just see if any other ways of elevating consciousness wants to come through, because those first 4 ways are very powerful. So another way is self-reflection. If you can understand, like journaling, self-reflection, writing things down, if you can become aware of the things that you're doing, and not only the things that you're doing, but the things that you're thinking and the ways that you're feeling, then you're going to start to become much more aware of who you are. Like the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So as you become aware of more of the low vibrational stuff that you don't prefer and don't want, you can begin to change that, heal it, and integrate it through the things that I was talking about, and raise up into higher levels of consciousness. A lot of good modalities can go along with that, like breath work, cold exposure. These can all be tools to help work through the process of some of these things. So I hope this has helped you. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I love this topic. I love looking at the map of human psychology and the different spirals that we go through. And it's really important to note that as we go through it, it's like each stage has something very, very important for each one of us. Each stage has something very important for like lessons and values to take away from it. For example, if somebody came and like was like gonna like mug you with a knife or a gun, and they pull a gun on you, you might go back to like the red stage in your life. You might be at a yellow, but in that moment, you might go to a red stage, fight or flight, hit them, break their nose, tackle them, get the gun. Or you might go straight to beige, like, and cower in the corner and like freeze and like, I'm not gonna make it out of here, I'm gonna die. Or you might be like, you know, in the blue phase and be like looking around for community and be like, hey, somebody here, help me, you know, like, and yell for some communal help. So my society that will label this as bad as well should come and help me. Or you might like tell them about God, you know, and like, you shouldn't do this. Like, you know, God loves you, right? Like, and that could be a very blue thing. But also like, or it could be an orange. It was really funny when I had this home-based business, when I was going through my orange phase, I really, it was funny because I had this thought, like, and I always wondered where this thought came from, but now I know, like, it was just a very orange thought. I'm like, man, and it was right in alignment with this. Like, if somebody came and mugged me, or if I ever get in trouble, like, I can offer them like this awesome opportunity where they can make a bunch of money with me now. And it's like, I found comfort in that for some reason. It's like bizarre, right? Like, if somebody's mugging me, it's like I can offer them something of monetary value where they can like help change their life and like come into a better expression and make money, right? In a better way. But if somebody's mugging you with a gun, they're at a red consciousness. And so for you to meet them in a business sense, orange consciousness isn't going to help. But at that orange level consciousness, I didn't understand the whole model of dynamics. And so it made sense to me. And so that's pretty cool. But like, so we can see that in different scenarios, we can resort back to traits that might really, really help you, right? Like if you're a green and you're all about empathy and making people feel included and loving them and loving the world, if somebody's got a gun or a knife in your face, like green might not be the most useful mode of operation for you to be in. So you might resort down to a red to try to overcome it, right? Or, you know, like, yeah. So yeah, just like interesting like that, how different like circumstances can bring out different facets of us that we actually need. See, like looking back on my life, the blue version of myself now would think that this version of myself, say in green and yellow, is a total heretic, like total heretic. Somebody who's talking about consciousness, somebody who's talking about like energy centers in the body and energy and frequency and the mind-body connection and optimizing your body through consciousness and intention, like total heretic, right? The person that I would have thought, like when I was an orange, I was, how is this going to make me money? Right? Like, how is this isn't really valuable to me in my life. And it wasn't valuable to me then. That's why I wasn't going to church during that time. I wasn't really doing anything very spiritual during that time. It was all about money, all about fitness, all about personal development, and all about becoming a better person through exterior, like rational, tangible means. It's where I started reading a lot of books. I'd never read up until that point in my life, and I started devouring books in the personal development stage. And yeah, I actually started devouring not just health and like business books, but spiritual books. And so that could be another thing as well, is diving in and reading topics that pique your interest, that might seem a little advanced, might seem a little out there, but if you can brave the idea that you're being deceived and not go into fear and worry about that and just follow the desires of your heart, you're going to realize that there's going to be gold at the end of that trail. So go after things that may seem a little bit scary to you, but really will bring you into a greater expression of who you are. Okay? So like, yeah, like it's super cool. Like I never thought that I was going to grow into the person that I am, because I always thought that it was going to be all about like business. Like my dad was very orange, and he worked really hard, and he became very successful in business and stuff. And I thought I was always going to follow in his footsteps. But as my consciousness started growing, it may have been the psychedelics when I was younger. It may have been just starting to connect within and reading these books and traveling. I went to India, and these different places Mexico and saw these different areas, my view became bigger than just me wanting that stuff, you know? And so I started to transcend the area that I was in, right? And this is why people who have higher levels of consciousness and are in these more evolved stages don't watch the mainstream news media anymore. They don't value the things that the masses of society are taking part in, because they realize that it's just, you know, it might be the best route for where they're at in their level, but they can see a bigger picture. They can see something that's beyond what's going on, right? And so, yeah, very, very interesting. I'm just trying to figure out if anything else wants to come through. So yeah, I think that's about it. Everything that you've heard today, just take it with a broad stroke. It's not absolute truth. It's not absolute fact. This is a model. This is a model to encourage you to, on the journey that we're all on, growing our consciousness, raising our frequency, raising our psychological states. Once again, I want to recap. Somebody who's in the red or somebody who's in the blue or somebody in the green is not better than somebody who's in the blue. Somebody who's in the red is not worse than somebody who's in the orange. We are all people. We are all beings. We are all humanity. We are all valuable. Do not look at this model and use it to judge or condemn people. That is not the point of this. The point of this is to the exact opposite, to be able to see people where they're at and be able to relate with them. See, this can be used by business leaders. This can be used in so many different situations. If you can know the consciousness of the person who you're talking to, then you can help them either feel secure and part of something, or you can make them feel like they're really powerful and valuable and that what they're doing is awesome, or you can make them, or you can empathize with them and connect with them around their feelings, or you can bring it all together and talk about the intricacies and interconnectedness of all of it, right? So it's very an awesome tool that we can use to help navigate our lives, navigate where we're at, and continue this growth process. So I love you guys. I hope you've taken something from this video of spiral dynamics. There's a lot of info on this if you want to look into it. Like, it's really, really powerful. But I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to this video, or to this concept, because just knowing about this concept will actually open the door to help go into the higher tiers of yellow and turquoise. So shalom, friends, and have a great week.